Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's Workshop. So I framed quite a few pictures in a previous video. I will leave a link in the description, but now I'm adding them into the rooms that I prepared them for. Among all those wonderful pictures were several pictures of little girls, and I thought they would be perfect in this room. And if you haven't seen my curtain video, definitely check that out in the link below as well. Even though I think art is lovely, it's something warm and cozy about vintage family pictures on the wall. Now this is very tedious, and it would be a best practice to remove all the furniture before you start this. Now if you look really closely on the dresser, there's a tiny picture frame there that was made from nail art. Let me get out of the way and stop disturbing the little girls. They're playing with their dolls and things that they got for Christmas. So let's go add some pictures to the cafe. Now this is a flashback of how the cafe wall looked prior to me getting the family pictures. Now I removed the other two pictures I made and left up the plate shelf. Now to get my hand in easier, I did remove the chandelier before I started adding the pictures. I don't know why it is when you know something is not going to work or not work well, but you do it anyway. It's like I feel like I waste more time trying to be careful by not removing the furniture, the chairs, and all the things on the table. So use wisdom for the safety of all your precious things and just remove everything from the room. It's really amazing how transformative a few black and white pictures and tiny frames clustered on the wall can truly just change the whole mood of the room. Now, dolls, this is definitely something you could piddle around with for hours trying to make sure every picture is perfect and aligned, but yeah, I'm noticing differences every time I look at it, but I'm really pleased with the overall look. I really like the way it makes the room feel. So let me pull my camera back so you can kind of get a full view of how the cafe looks with the new pictures. I think it really looks nice, but I wonder if the dolls will even notice with everything that's going on in the rooming house. Things are kind of quiet right now. Let's peek in and see what's going on among the dolls. I see why the rooming house is so quiet, because all the men are over at the dress shop. In the last episode, Aunt Bess insisted abruptly that she wants everything from the sewing room moved to the third floor and to set the beds back up in the room that is currently the sewing room. The men definitely weren't happy about it because it meant more work, but Big Daddy consoled the men, letting them know that they wouldn't have to deal with Aunt Bess anymore until after the wedding when they have to work on her kitchen. It was unbelievable how quickly they got everything out of the sewing room up to the third floor. And when they got done, they left as quickly as possible so that she couldn't ask them to do anything additional. Now keep in mind, Aunt Janie is at the house tending to Violet, and Miss Betty had business to tend to today, so she wasn't at the shop. So Aunt Bess was working alone in the dress shop, and she couldn't come up and give directions as the men were moving, and they were so glad. They put everything into the appointed rooms and left. By the time Aunt Bess got done with all of the customers and got to the third floor to check, it was too late for her to call the men back to make any adjustments. And she already knew that she had annoyed them, so she knew she was stuck to get everything in order by herself. And although everything wasn't perfect, she really liked that they put her sewing machine in the most prominent spot in the room. Although Aunt Bess was tired, she quickly went to work to make sure everything was in order before Aunt Janie got home. You see, Aunt Bess gave the men orders to make the changes about the room assignments, but she had not consulted Aunt Janie at all. As soon as Aunt Janie got home, Aunt Bess told her what she had done. She said, "Bess, you do things like this all the time and you don't consult me. And a lot of times I let it go, but this time you've gone too far." When Aunt Janie stepped in the bedroom, she saw everything was arranged really nice. And right above Aunt Janie's bed was a picture of her and Bess when they were little girls, all dressed up in their Sunday best. It brought back so many memories of them as children together. And on the other side of the room, it was a beautiful picture of Aunt Charlotte, Uncle Barley's wife, when she was a baby, and a picture of her father. And although Aunt Janie was really upset with Aunt Bess right now, the room looked really nice. All it needed was some curtains. Aunt Bess and Aunt Janie have been friends since they were children, so their memories and friendship go back to childhood. Although it wasn't popular back then, they always dreamed of being businesswomen. When Aunt Janie saw her Bible laying on her bed, she knew that Aunt Bess had done that on purpose. Aunt Janie knows that Aunt Bess is trying to remind her about forgiveness. Aunt Janie was still quite annoyed, but she went on up to the third floor and saw the office. And when she saw the office, she realized that Aunt Bess had pictures of them as young women. The picture brought back so many memories. Back then, Aunt Janie made the connections and Aunt Bess made the clothes. But then Aunt Bess fell in love, got married, and had Charlotte. Without Aunt Bess, Aunt Janie wasn't able to sew as well. She went off to sewing school. Although Aunt Janie could sew, she wasn't as fast and efficient as Aunt Bess. So when she couldn't pay the bills sewing, she started a small perfume business. Aunt Janie's mom used to mix medicine and she worked as a midwife, so Aunt Janie understood a little bit about chemistry. But the success of the perfume business didn't last long. When Aunt Janie stepped into the sewing room, she realized that as mad as she was with Aunt Bess for not consulting her, it was really a good decision. It was much bigger and way more room than there was in the bedroom downstairs. As she glanced around the room, she looked up and realized that Aunt Bess had put their old sign from the original dress shop on the sewing room wall. It was a little faded and stained, but it was still just as beautiful and all the dreams were still intact. All Aunt Janie could think about was that Bess has done it again. Although Aunt Bess was a little pushy and a little impulsive, she was really a great businesswoman and an excellent seamstress. By this time, Aunt Janie had already forgiven Aunt Bess, but she wasn't going to tell her. She was going to allow her to tiptoe around her for a little while because she needed to learn her lesson. Because as quiet as it's kept, Aunt Bess is a little bit afraid of Aunt Janie. Not a dangerous fear, but more of a fear as in respect or honor, because Aunt Janie is a little bit older, and many times she stood up for Aunt Bess and fought for her. I'm not sure if you can imagine, Aunt Bess had her share of conflicts when they were children. Meanwhile, back at the rooming house, Claude was telling Grandpa jokes, and Grandpa was just hysterical with laughter. Claude told joke after joke back to back. He was hoping eventually he could get a laugh or a smile out of Harper. Harper was not amused at all. She thought he was very childish. She could see Claude kept looking at her every time he told a joke. Harper was absolutely disinterested, but that didn't stop Claude. Up on the second floor in the back hall, Albert and Sadie were having a conversation. They were really glad to be done with the work at the dress shop, and now they had to start working on Sadie and Marguerite's new bedroom for after they get married. Albert was talking to Sadie about how excited he was about becoming a new father. Just then, Marguerite appeared on the steps. She said hello to Albert and told Sadie she really needed to talk to him. Albert told Sadie to go ahead because he needed to go in and check on Violet anyway. As Albert went into his room and closed the door, Sadie followed Marguerite down the steps and through the pantry into the kitchen. Sadie was really concerned because she seemed nervous, and he took her by the hands and asked her what was wrong. Marguerite began to explain to Sadie that she cared for him a lot, but that she was just nervous about everything. He told her he was nervous too, but that everything would be okay. Marguerite told Sadie that she was more than nervous. She said that she didn't know if she was ready to get married. At that moment, Sadie felt really nervous, but he didn't want Marguerite to know how he felt. And then he asked her, "Are you saying that you don't want to marry me?" And Marguerite said, No, I'm not saying that. I just feel like with all the talk and the things the ladies were saying, I don't know if I'm really ready to get married right now. Marguerite said, "Could we wait a few weeks or maybe a couple months?" And Sadie said, "Yes, you can have whatever time you need because I want you to be sure and I'm not going anywhere." Just then, Sadie told Marguerite, "I love you and I'll wait for you." Sadie told her he understood that she was scared and that he was scared too, but he knew for sure that he loved her and he wanted to be with her the rest of his life. Just then, Sadie said, "Wait, I have something for you." And he bolted out of the kitchen and up the steps and back through the hallway to his room. Sadie moved like lightning, bringing back what he had for her. He handed Marguerite a valentine, which was to mark the anniversary of the first day he ever laid eyes on her. He knew that first day that he wanted to marry her, and he wanted her to hold on to the valentine and read it and think about it, to think about him every time she read it. He told her to read it every day until she's sure. Just then Marguerite kissed Sadie again. Sadie was so nervous, and he was trying to be a gentleman, so he kept his hands straight down at his sides. Although Marguerite wanted to wait to get married, Sadie's concerns melted away with that kiss. Early the next morning, Sterling was up trying to make sure that latch for the attic ladder was secure. He didn't want Marva upset about it coming open again. After lunch, everyone was in the dining room, and Marguerite and Sadie announced to the family that they wanted to postpone the wedding. Sterling stood up and immediately insisted on an explanation. Sterling also reminded Sadi that he was the one who had pushed up the engagement at Christmas time, telling everyone that he wanted to get married in February before the spring. So now all of a sudden, what's the reason for you pushing it back? Everyone in the room was concerned at this point as to why they wanted to postpone it. And everyone was really concerned because Sterling was getting very, very agitated. So you have to understand, Marguerite is 19 and Sadi is actually 26. So after all the letters and telegrams asking Sterling to allow Sadi to court Marguerite, now he wants to postpone the wedding. Marguerite and Sadi had their arms linked together in an act of solidarity, wanting everybody to know that this was their decision. Sterling was very upset and feeling very suspicious. Sterling asked, "What did you say to my daughter to make her want to postpone the wedding?" Sadi stepped in front of Marguerite and said, "I didn't say anything to her. This is her decision, and I'm standing by her. She and I talked last night, and she told me that she wanted to wait." Just then, Sadi realized that he shouldn't have said that. And Sterling said, "When did you talk to my daughter last night? Where were you talking to her last night? You had no business talking to my daughter last night." At that moment, Marva grabbed Sterling to hold him back. At the same time, Marguerite stepped in front of Sadi to face her father. She said, "Daddy, no, we were just talking in the kitchen. We both just happened to be in the kitchen, and I told him how I felt." Sterling said, "Marguerite, what is all this about? I don't understand it. I don't like it. I really don't like it." Marguerite said, "Daddy, I just need some time. We haven't sent out any invitations. I just need a little time to think about everything." Although Sterling was really upset and he didn't like what was going on, he loved Marguerite and he just wanted her to be happy. Sterling asked, "How long is this postponement?" And Marguerite said, "Just a couple months, a few weeks." Sterling said, "A couple months, a few weeks." He said, "Oh, I don't like this." Big Ma leaned towards Sterling and whispered, "They just have a case of cold feet." Just then Sterling said, "Cold feet or no cold feet, I better not catch you talking to my daughter at night ever again until after you've married her." Sadi said, "Yes, sir, I understand." He said, "But I would never do anything to hurt Marguerite. I love her." Sterling said, "I hope you do, and I hope you conduct yourself like a gentleman and keep all your love to yourself until after you're married." Even though Sterling had stopped yelling, you could tell he was really, really, really upset. Just then, Miss Maisie stood up and said, "Enough of all this. You all need to just leave these children alone." She said, "You act like you've forgotten what it's like to be young. You act like you've forgotten what it's like to be afraid and in love." She said, "I'm older than all of you, and I still remember." She said, "The children didn't say they don't want to get married. They just said they need a little time, and I think everybody needs a little time." And Miss Maisie said, "And Marguerite's not even crying. So everything's going to be okay." Everybody knows Marguerite cries about everything, so the fact that she's not crying is a good sign. Just then, Miss Maisie started giving orders, and she told Sadi and Marguerite to sit down. After Miss Maisie had put everybody out of the dining room, she began to talk to Marguerite and Sadi about the truth about marriage and love and family. Sadi and Marguerite listened attentively to Miss Maisie because Miss Maisie had been married over 50 doll years before Grandpa Little went back to the manufacturer. And even after all these years, she still speaks lovingly of him. Miss Maisie had Marguerite and Sadi turn their chairs toward each other. She said, "You all need to just sit and talk and work things out." She said, "With all this working and planning for the wedding, you all have barely had time to sit down and spend some time with each other. So you're about to do that right now." It was a funny thing about Miss Maisie. She was very quiet. She didn't say much. She talked more today than she had the whole time since she's been at the rooming house. But she seems to understand young people way more than their parents do. When Miss Maisie returned, Marguerite was smiling. Miss Maisie was glad to see that. Miss Maisie dismissed Sadi, but before he left, she hugged him and whispered in his ear, "Don't fret, you're not losing your wife." When she was sure that Sadi was gone and the doors were closed, Miss Maisie turned and stared at Marguerite for a long, long time. And Miss Maisie slowly put her hands on her hips and looked at Marguerite and said, "What is all this business about you postponing the wedding?" Miss Maisie said, "Marguerite, you got the whole house in an uproar over this. Sadi is scared, your dad is angry, and everybody in the house is on pins and needles." Meanwhile, there were micro conversations happening all over the rooming house. Everyone was talking about the postponement of the wedding. Pop and Big Daddy were really concerned because they had intervened to get Sterling's permission for Sadi to court Marguerite to help get the two of them together. And now all of this is happening. Up on the second floor, Big Ma was talking to Marva, trying to console her. Big Ma assured Marva that this is just something young people go through. She told her to continue to prepare and get things ready for the wedding. We'll just hold off the dates. Miss Fountain and Evelyn had agreed to help with the invitations, and they were really excited about participating. Now they're worried they won't get a chance. After Miss Maisie put everybody out of the dining room, Uncle Benny and Aunt Vera went across the street to Uncle Barley and Aunt Charlotte's house to talk to them about what had happened. Aunt Vera was in charge of decorations, and Aunt Charlotte was helping with the cake and the menu, so they were both very concerned. While Aunt Vera and Charlotte were talking, Aunt Vera kept looking at Charlotte. Charlotte said she didn't feel good. Aunt Vera asked her what was wrong, and she told her she was having a hard time keeping her food down. She'd been feeling nauseous quite a bit. After Aunt Vera got her to go upstairs and lay down, she sat with her a while, and as Aunt Vera sat with her, she asked her a few questions. By the time she got done talking to her, she told her she thought that she may need to talk to Aunt Janie. And Vera stayed with Charlotte until she drifted off to sleep. One minute they want to rush, now they want to postpone it. Sterling is beginning to regret that he gave Sadie consent to court Marguerite. Sterling feels like when he saw Sadie, he should have just said no. Realizing who he was, who his father was, their history, he should have just said no. All Sterling can hope for now is that his daughter's heart doesn't get broken like his did so many years ago.